track record. But anyway, not to pick on Robert Hughes, but these people are extremely vindictive. They're very unhappy, and make a living out of putting people down. And so the greatest compliment I could have was Lou Reed coming up to me and telling me that he felt like Andy was finally portrayed in a way that was close to what Andy was really like.
You've given me a perfect lead-in. Take a look at this clip, and we'll see Andy, and then when at the end of this clip, David Bowie joins us. Take a look here.
I mean, everyone walks by and sees your stuff here. Warhol. That's Andy Warhol. He's the prettiest painter in the world. No, he paints by numbers. You don't. What are you doing? You give him one of these, man. He should have one. Don't give him anything, man. Trade. Trade. Yeah. That's what real artists do with each other. Besides, he'll just use you, man. He's famous for it.
It's not like dead before I finish painting them.
Can I help you? You want to buy some ignorant art? $10 a piece.
No, I think it's okay.
Of course, Mr. Bishop.
Gee, ignorant art, Bruno.
Yeah, you know, like stupid, like ridiculous, crummy art.
Oh, that sounds good. That's new.
$10.
Oh, gee, it didn't work very much on these. I can give you like 5. Come on, Bruno, you're rich. Maybe you should talk to Bruno.
You don't even work on your stuff.
No, it's not how much you work on something that matters. It's how much you get for them.
You can get 10.
These are great, Bruno. Maybe I'll take 2. I'll take, let me see these. I'll take this one and, I don't know. Bruno, can I borrow some money?
Yeah. Here, you have change?
You made a good deal. You can have those too.
Oh, let me look at those, Bruno.
Yeah, but they're mine now, Andy. Huh?
Sure they're yours, Bruno. Everything good's yours.
Joining us now, David Bowie. Pretty good, sir. Not bad. How did you go about? Did you know Andy?
I knew him superficially.
That's what I meant. Did you really know him?
No. No, I saw him, I think, just about everywhere in New York in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And so I didn't go much beyond just sort of having noted kind of what his spirit was, the way he moved and stuff. And just his attitude. It was more of an impersonation than anything else. That's how I sort of approach anything like that.
Who helped you? I mean, did you Julian, his sense of Andy, your sense of Andy?
No, Julian helped all of us as actors, I think, by just allowing us freedom into pretty much how we wanted to portray. He had a take on the actual relationship between Warhol and BASQUIAT, which was an insight, a very useful one. That there was a strong, possibly something that bordered on a love-hate relationship in Andy's eyes. I put maybe hate's too strong a word, maybe awareness on Andy's part. I think that Julian pointed out to me how affectionate Andy was towards BASQUIAT, and almost like a mentor or a father figure. And I probably put in my take that it probably went a step further than that. There was a realization that this might be tomorrow's world. And he wanted also to keep his eye on that and learn from it, but also impart his knowledge to Jean-Michel, who he genuinely cared for.
A kind of trade-off. Yeah.
A reciprocal relationship.
Yeah. He was getting something and giving something.
I think he just wanted to be involved in it, whatever it was, you know.
And he saw what in Jean-Michel? A sense of...
I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just played him the way I thought I might play him in that particular situation. So I looked at him as somebody who didn't seem to have much kind of knowledge of or care too much for the art world, which Warhol by that stage was deeply immersed in. And you kind of, I mean, it's nice working with new musicians, guys who've just gotten into the music business, you know, and you kind of, especially if they're real talented, and you want to really get them to play some things you think, I know how this guy could really work really well, but also you want them to be involved in what you're doing too, you know, because this guy is so great. It would be great if he worked with me in my band and do that sort of thing. I think there might have been a similar kind of feeling with Warhol. Who knows?
I mean, I think when you look at Andy's early paintings, the paintings with like wigs or there's crayon drawings on a lot of these pictures that are not dissimilar from the appearance of Jean-Michel's paintings. And I think if you look at their work from the 60s and Jean-Michel's paintings, there's a real logic why they would do this thing together. I think they had a very, very pure relationship, and people were always sort of second-guessing who was using who and all of that.
There was also something dogmatically figurative about what Basquiat did, which at that particular time, I think, is having a kind of a renaissance. The idea of the figurative was coming back very much as a part of the vocabulary of new art. And Warhol had always worked in a very... I don't think of him as an iconoclast in any way. I don't think he destroyed anything. I think, in fact, he was reaching back to... I mean, he was from a Catholic family, so I think there was something that disenfranchised Catholic about him. And he's in a Puritan, Pilgrim-based country. So I think that the sweep of the reform kind of is felt throughout all American art. And I think that he felt the strength of the image, which has a Catholic basis, but awareness of the so-called mythic and spiritual qualities of it. So it took the spiritual and emotional heart out of a lot of the images that he worked with. It's kind of it was a strange dichotomy. And I think he recognized the passion in Basquiat's own figurativeness, which is something that he actually didn't use in his approach to figurativism.
I mean, I have all sorts of opinions about all
Go
this.
ahead.
We don't agree on anything.
Any of
brother.
this?
Nothing at all.
Nothing.
No.
No. Well, we agree on a lot of things, but just in terms of, I think what you're saying is very, very interesting. It's just, it's just that there's
Nothing pleases me more than to see two creative people engage an interpretation.
but there's a way of being emotional.
Two critics, that's even more interesting.
There's a way of being emotional without being nostalgic, or without being sentimental. Because I think that a lot of Andy's images that were very emotional to look at.
No, I'm not talking about it. I'm not talking about sentimentality. I think that there's a distrust of the inherent religiosity in all images, especially in a Puritan or Protestant country. And I think that's affected a lot of American art. I think particularly with Andy. I think that he railed against the idea of religiosity in art, although he, but by the same token, created icons of a religious nature, even if they're unwitting. They are the new religion of image and consumer imagism.
What do you...
Well said.
What do you... I want to come back to a point, Julian, but the point you and I were talking about being victim or self-destructive. Jean-Michel.
Well, I don't buy into...
I just want to say one thing about that. When Jean and Andy worked together on these pictures, and I think that they both found it very, very compelling, when they showed these paintings, they were attacked, panned universally. So it's sort of like when Jean-Pierre Léaud in 400 Blows builds a shrine to Victor Hugo and he sets his house on fire. He didn't mean to, he just wanted to learn his lesson real well. Jean-Michel thought that he was doing something really constructive working with Andy, and I think they were both, and he more than Andy was very, very shocked, and his feelings were hurt when their work was met with disapproval. But we're the beneficiaries of that work. I mean, whether they were attacked or whatever, now we get to see this map or this diagram of this relationship that they had.
You said something which I thought was really quite pertinent about the idea of the movie attempting to demystify the process of art making. I think the great fight is that the art world, the established art world, it's fundamental to keep an established art world, that the mystery is kept in place, because once it falls into the hands of the proletariat, that the ability to make art is in fact inherent with all of us. It demolishes the idea of art for commerce, and that's no good for business. And so I think that there's always a great coming together of a commerce establishment, which the art world is basically a commerce establishment, to protect its own. I mean, the perfect example is that there were many signers or graffiti artists working in the late 70s and in the early 80s. Why should it be that only 2 or 3 of them, Scharf, Haring, and BASQUIAT, should be taken from the sea of signers that were working in New York, some of them incredibly talented guys, and then elevated to a point that there was something particularly special about those 3 guys? It behoves the art establishment to elevate them to a higher plateau as fast as possible, to make them unavailable aesthetically to a low art market. And it does that continually. It's very capable of...
It behoves the art community to do that.
Yes, it extends its parameters quite widely to capture the new thing.
Because that does...
And elevate it from low art to high art, successfully enough to increase the commerce proposition that goes along with it.
In order to enhance the value of the painting.
Absolutely.
For all concerned, for the dealer and for
to
everybody.
consign the idea of art to a particular world.
Do you agree with that, Julian?
Well, I thought it was very interesting when he was talking about, like, that everybody could be an artist. And I think that's a very healthy attitude. And because I think
it's nice to say on the street, but you try and see it work in practice.
I don't think the business of selling a work of art has anything to do with the value of a work of art.
It shouldn't.
It doesn't.
It
I mean, the same painting that Jean-Michel Basquiat painted that was sold for $5,000 when he was alive is sold for $200,000 right now. It's the same painting.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because we are all expendable under the notion of having the rarefied art object. But the fact is that...
if you stand next to it, you'll get better. The
Stand
idea
next
is
to
that
who?
if you stand next to an art object, somehow its mystique and its goodness and its high-mindedness will rub off onto you.
Well,
To many collectors.
I mean,
I'm not saying to all. There's a lot of...
Last point on this, I'm going to move on, but go ahead. Go ahead.
I think that people, when they buy a work of art, I think that's absolutely true, that people, they buy into it, they can be responsible for the philosophy that or the behavior that this work of art represents. But if you don't look at it in such a sort of cynical or commercial way, I actually believe that somebody could look at a work of art or have they can have a cathartic experience, and art can be a healing tool.
Yes.
I think that's why you worked on this film. I think that's why we made this film. It certainly wasn't about selling paintings or trying to get rich. But music, actually one great thing that Jean-Michel said when question was, when they said, where do you take your words from? He said, where do you take, would you ask Miles or would you ask a musician where you take that note from? And he was telling people, why don't you just look at paintings the way and give it with the same kind of freedom that you do when you listen to music? And I think that was very important.
Why'd you select him to play Andy Warhol?
Because he lived next door. No. It's a very, Andy Warhol's a very, very, very known person. His image has been all over the tabloids, whatever. We've seen pictures of Andy Warhol. I needed a doppelganger. I needed a pop icon to play a pop icon. I wanted people to say, is this Andy Warhol playing David Bowie or David Bowie playing Andy Warhol? And I think he did it. I don't think anybody could have done a better job. And there was something that's so, he's very feisty right now, but when he's wearing his Andy Warhol getup, he's so...
Sweet.
Yes, and approachable also, and kind of forgiving.
I'll approach you.
Now, I'm just talking, when you, excuse me, I'm spitting on the table here. And, when you were in that thing, there was something so swishy also about you. And
Swishy.
I got real interested in everybody. I found that when I put the wig on, I started it was so easy just to stand around and watch what everybody was doing and get real in and, oh, that's great.
It's a wonderful freedom.
What's he doing over there?
To be interested in other people. I mean, I think that's the key to your success. I mean, you're actually curious.
That's right.
It's a wonderful thing. My daughter Stella is, she's plays actually Gary's daughter in the movie, but she's actually curious, and she could sit there and talk to people, and it's wonderful.
Yeah,
when you're a
she's
good
great.
listener, you get a lot more than when you're a good talker.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I've heard.
Touche.
You listen long enough to say you've heard. Did you immediately say, yes, I want to do this?
Funnily enough, you know, I don't know if you remember Julian, but Julian, when he first got, I think he pulled it together originally about 6 years ago.
Well, I started working on this thing.
It must have been around then that you first sent me the script. He sent me the script a long, long time ago.
Probably 4 years ago or 5. Yeah, a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And at that time, it was before I knew my present wife, so it was at least that long ago.
Right.
It's got to have been 6 years. And I turned it down because, one, I'm not passionately interested in making movies. It doesn't appeal to me much. But mainly, I didn't know Julian. And it was only when I met Julian that I became really immersed in the idea. I love the idea that parameters between the art forms are beginning to fall down. It's happening an awful lot in Europe. And it's beginning to happen.
Between film, music, and painting.
Yeah. And it seems to be happening to a certain extent here.
Don't get started.
No, I won't get started.
Yeah, all right.
But Julian, for me, typified the kind of the spirit of someone who can apply their aesthetic sensibilities or whatever philosophy they have that propels them through life into any of the art form. If you have an understanding of what the tools are, and they're all moderately the same, funnily enough, then you can apply yourself to each of the different arts and make some kind of decent job out of it. And I really believe that he could actually carry this off the way he talked about it and live with it and ate it and breathed it. I know that passion so well. It's like, yeah, I have it with music, you know, whatever. And I just knew that he would
Why
be able to
didn't,
do
I
it.
mean, if someone said to me, tell me a star who would like to be in film, I would have thought you.
I think it's probably one of the most boring professions that you could ever consider. To be an actor, for me personally,
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are actors, and it suits them just fine. But
Your personality
I
not
just work in
suited
a
to
different
waiting.
way. No, I'm far more interested in the plastic arts and material values of playing a piano or a saxophone or creating some music or painting or stuff like that. I'm not that interested in interpreting characters and stuff.
Really?
No.
And nothing happened in this film to change that?
Absolutely none.
Nothing.
And he had the good grace to only give me 10 days, which was just fabulous.
That was about
I mean,
your
I
limit,
could
huh?
slip
10
in,
days
go
was
out,
about
and
it for
I
you.
could continue.
But I
another one.
think that one thing that does happen, no matter what you do, you go through something, you decide that you're going to like lean towards a divine light in some kind of way. You're going to put on Andy's wig. You're going to do that thing.
Oh, yeah. No, I wanted to really do it
there's
if I was going to do
something
it.
that happens that is this sort of transcendental thing. It's like you don't know what it is. I think in Tennessee Williams, in The Fugitive Kind, the sheriff's wife, it was played by, not, what's the wife of Archie Bunker? Yes. Anyway,
Stapleton was the actress.
yes, Jean Stapleton.
and Jean Stapleton.
Maureen, her sister.
Maureen Stapleton, right.
Yes. She played this, and she was painting, and she made this painting, and she was married to the sheriff in this horrible town. And she said, I don't know, after I get done doing that, I feel elevated. Now, after you got done doing that thing, you weren't painting and you weren't singing, but there was this thing that you go through, that we went through, and you know that you capture something that you had no idea about before. You lean towards this thing, you put your faith in other people, and you do this thing together, and when you walk out of it, you know that something happened, that you were altered in
Is
some way.
Jean-Michel an interesting character to you?
Yes, I'm passionately fond of his work.
You are?
Yeah, I have a number of his paintings.
And you bought them when? In the early 80s?
I've been buying art since '68. I've been collecting all my life. It's one of my major obsessions.
And obsessions about whom? Who do you collect then?
Mainly the British. But I've got a couple of American painters.
Have anything of Julian's?
Actually, I do have one that he doesn't even know about. I've never told him this. No, I actually have
Well,
one.
let's hear. Which one?
It's just a small drawing.
Where did it
that
come?
Came from London. I bought quite some time ago.
You didn't know this?
No.
No.
Now, do you have anything of Jean-Michel's?
Yes.
How many?
6.
6. When did you buy them? Or when were they given to you?
Different times. I mean, one drawing
That he
gave me is
that
from
he painted
1985.
while you were there in your studio.
Right, and then there's some other ones that actually I bought out of the show that Robert Miller had that Michael Kimmelman said was so terrible. And I have this big painting that Andy and Jean-Michel painted together also that's about...
Did Kimmelman hate that show?
Yeah.
That's really funny. He loved Damien Hirst. I wonder how he has that.
Well, you know, I wouldn't even think about what he thinks. But, this, you know, the painting with the mobile gas painting.
Oh, yeah.
You know what's interesting about you, Julian, is that you, I mean, I read all the stuff about you, most of the stuff about you, about the movie, and know about David, know about your art. You, without fear or trepidation, mention what critics have said about you and about the film, without trepidation, for example, what Robert Hughes said. Because you don't care, because you don't value what they say, because...
I mean, I'm not scared. What can he has no effect on my life at all. I mean, if he did, I would be broke, penniless, and have brain cancer and be in, you know, like Bangladesh or something like that right now.
I think the great thing about art, generally includes music or anything, is that the direction of art is always dictated by the artists. If anybody had told many critics in the 50s and 60s that in fact, not Picasso wasn't going to be the only great god of the 20th century, but Duchamp was actually going to be the god at the end of the 20th century, I think they would have and probably did balk and push and struggle that it wouldn't be Duchamp, you know. But the artists made up their mind that they were going to be incredibly influenced by him, and they worked, a lot of them, in that manner. And it produced the Bruce Naumans and, you know, the Rebecca Horns and whatever. And in music it happens the same way. However much critics write, the other musicians decide who they're going to be influenced by, and the history and the story of the music will come through the artists all the time.
Absolutely. It's like a note passed from one person to the next. I mean, you can't lie to young people that have no, like, cliques of power that they need to support. Either they're going to find your work useful, and they're going to take it somewhere and do something with it, or it will be meaningless to them. It doesn't matter how many fancy friends you have, or how many people are buddies of this one, or whatever.
Who has influenced you the most, Julian? Other than Mary Boone.
I'm influenced by everything.
Oh, of course you are. But I mean,
whose art do I love?
Yeah.
Whose art do I love? Well, that's a
Picasso.
I love Picasso's paintings, and
You love the portraiture.
I love many of his paintings. I like the late paintings very, very much.
You didn't ever say, did you? I mean, did you say and mean?
Go on.
The famous comparison between you and Picasso?
What is it? What was
Well,
I
somewhere I
supposed to
read
say?
that you had said that you were going to rank, or you associated yourself with
No, that
Picasso.
was me.
No?
I think that, you know, people have said that I've said all sorts of stuff that, I mean, listen, I'm guilty of, and I will admit to being guilty for most things, but I'd like to be at least guilty for my own crimes.
Yeah.
For example, in this article, somebody said, how do you feel about this man, I don't remember his name, you know, feel about what do you think your place is?
Right.
And I said, well, why don't you tell me what you think? Why do I have to say what I think? So at another point, I said, well, I wouldn't trade places with anybody. I mean, would you like to be somebody else? Do you want to trade places with somebody? I mean, would you, Charlie, would you like to be somebody else?
No.
Is there,
No one who does
is there some hubris connected with that? Like
no.
that you're happy to be yourself?
Exactly.
Or would you rather be Tom Snyder?
Well, no.
Okay, I mean, it doesn't
mean I don't like Tom Snyder.
Right, exactly, you know? And it's just,
Or-
it's like, you know, people would like me to be able to do all this stuff, have one arm tied behind my back, and not touch the floor while I'm doing it, and sort of disappear while it's getting made.
Yeah. But are we going to see, this is the point you were making about Europe, where you're seeing these walls break down between music, between, you know, We're seeing, I mean, you're not the first painter to want to make films.
I don't want to stop painting either.
Yeah.
But, you know, another thing that happened in the 80s that was a great thing is that a lot of the boundaries broke down between all of these different countries. There were these exhibitions like Metropolis,
Yeah,
Zeitgeist,
but it
and there was not just an American art.
I agree with you there, but I think the real telling time was when the wall came down, just in 1990 then. A major change swept through Europe. And there was a new feeling. It was a friendly, gleeful kind of iconoclasm that happened.
But it's
sweeping away.
No, it started earlier than that. With
It started early, and that started with people in Europe, with people like Gilbert and George and that crowd. But I mean, it going from one medium to the other.
But I'm just talking about like Francesco Clemente and all of the Italian artists, and there were German artists, and before there was a great American chauvinism, and like we have in the museum.
But that's not quite true. I mean, how can you say that? I mean, I don't. There is.
We're going to get into this argument.
Yeah, I hope so.
There is no country which has an indigenous population that created this art form. I mean, most of British art, our best British art, comes from Europe. Hans Holbein, Van Dyck, to start with, and going a history through there, even to right now people like Lucian Freud and Kossoff, Frank Auerbach from that school. And there's now the Czechoslovakians, the Chapman brothers.
What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that in America, I mean, you say that Clementi and these guys came over in the 80s, but there had already been Duchamp, there had already been...
No, but what I'm... let me be more specific. What I'm talking about is when you have a museum like the Whitney Museum of American Art, and you have an exhibition, a biennale, and you're not going to have Italian painters, and you're not going to have German painters, and that's what I'm talking about, in 1980 or whatever, 1990, and you're not going to have English painters because they're not from the United States. There's a form of chauvinism. And what I'm saying is that these people, and of course, I mean, Bill de Kooning came from Holland, and Europeans have always come over here and got rid of their baggage and been great Americans.
But I'm talking about the even further breaking down, the splintering of the parameters between the art forms themselves, which is...
Sure, well, that's a whole other...
Yeah, but that's very much the feeling at the moment. That is the zeitgeist at the time.
But what we're talking about, if we're talking about also the 80s, or when this thing was going on, I mean, I think that Jean-Michel, in his early 20s, achieved a place in the international art world where there was definitely a voice.
Did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that place?
Well, he was like a cipher in a way. He would take everything from the Bible, auto mechanics catalogs, obscure Byzantine neighborhoods, lists of...
Afrocentric and Western.
Yes, and I'm going to steal one of your cigarettes. And,
Sure, go ahead.
And,
we got 3 more minutes here. Go ahead.
Right. And he'd put them through his grist in some way, and he would come out with this poetic revision of the world.
Yeah,
and
he was very popular in Europe, and Warhol was more popular in Europe than he was in America during his own lifetime.
Is that right?
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
absolutely true.
Absolutely right. I mean, he was
more popular.
He was regarded very suspiciously in America, Warhol, generally. But Europe ate him up. I mean, we really...
See, now I have a great idea for you, Julian.
Yeah.
Why don't you make a film about Andy Warhol's life with David starring as your next film?
Oh, he already did that, and I already sort of did that. But, you know, but I'll tell you, one night...
He already did what? He already did David.
He already did that, but, you know, one night I was standing in front of McDonald's on University Place, and Jean-Michel and Andy were working together. And they didn't usually work in that part of the studio. But I was just standing there in the dark, looking up at the studio on 17th Street, and I saw Jean walk towards the wall, and Andy, we have to roll.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And they were, and I just saw them, and it was silent, you know, and you just saw these two people, and, I mean, they could not look more dissimilar, but they were somehow twins.
Yeah.
And they were doing this thing, and I thought, God, I'd like to kind of tell the story of this relationship, because I think Andy is one of the most misunderstood people since Hitler. I mean...
Hitler was misunderstood?
Well, maybe he wasn't. Maybe I'm
But Andy was
I don't
how?
wanna
In
bring
what way?
Hitler in-
No,
into
I don't
this,
either. But
you know.
how was Andy misunderstood?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that think that Hitler was a good guy. I mean, I would say they misunderstood him.
Yeah, they
As misunderstood as Julian Schnabel.
all right, well, let's stay with Andy, though. How was Andy misunderstood?
Well, he was seen as a vampire. He was seen as somebody that took advantage of other people. You never, and then even in his diaries, it seemed like he was bitchy or whatever. But we're all, when we're alone with people that we know real well, we'll say whatever comes to our minds. But the fact is, he was very generous. He was a kind. He was a great painter. I don't even know that he really. I think he believed that Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg and Roy Lichtenstein were great painters.
Yeah.
I don't think he even believed in his own. He was very insecure about
Yeah.
what he was
Yeah.
doing. But I think he was one of the real great painters of the 20th century. I mean, he's very important to me, and I think Jean-Michel felt that way also. And when Lou Reed said to me, you know, that you really showed him the way he was, and that made me feel like finally this person was represented in a way that was accurate, that meant more to me than any criticism that I could receive for the film or any good review or whatever. It was something that I wanted to make a requiem for Andy. When Jean-Michel was sitting there looking at that television set, which you'll see in the film whenever you see it, I blended images that Jonas Mekas had taken of Andy with David, and there was this. We watched both of them, and his death was the death in the film rather than Jean's, because Jean kind of kept going, in a sense, and Andy died for them in terms of the drama of the film, and it was a love note to them in a sense. I made a requiem for them. That's basically what my job was, and I don't. When you ask me about making another movie or whatever, I would have to care as much about the subject matter, and I don't want to be employed. I would like to do something in a way where it's uncompromised, and I think that I had final cut over this film, and there are no compromises in this film. But I was only able to do it with people like David and Chris and Dennis and Gary and Jeffrey Wright, and people who really gave me their soul and their heart and their energy. And without this kind of cooperation, this was sort of an impossible task. There was
Chris Walken is outstanding in this movie. He's great.
He's
got
absolutely
he just
brilliant.
eats it up. There's one scene that I die. I mean, he's just so wonderful. He's so
He
great.
is, and Chris Walken wrote a beautiful play that was called Him. I saw it twice.
Is that a Presley thing?
Yeah, and I told my daughters that they had to come see it with me because it was like watching Marlon Brando perform open heart surgery on himself. And he said, if you can't surprise yourself, how do you expect to surprise anyone else? And I think that whatever I do, I don't do it to illustrate what I know. I do it to find out something that I don't know.
That's very true. When you work in a creative area, you, if you're working in a comfortable area, you know nothing much is going to be produced. It's only when you start to move just slightly out of your depth and you feel you're a little bit lost, that's when you're going to get something exciting going. It'll either be a dismal failure or it'll be spectacularly what you really want to do.
And, you know, Bill Gaddis wrote in the Recognitions in 1953, most paintings, the instant you see them, they become familiar, and then it's too late. So people want to be comfortable. They get nervous when they're uncomfortable, but I think if artists are comfortable and they don't come out to know something that they don't know anything about, you never get anything new.
I agree. I agree there.
Well, we agree about a lot of things. It's just this, you know, that...
Thank you both. It's a pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
having
very
us
much
here.
for having us.
Good to have you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.